On the coldest midnight, a plus-size bakery clerk begs a feared Mafia boss for just one night to feel wanted. He says no, then pays off her debt and moves her into his guarded penthouse. By morning, cameras catch them together, and the city turns on her. A rival marks her as bait, a corrupt landlord sells her address, and inside a battered recipe box, a missing ledger whispers a deadly secret about who got her mother killed. He's lethal to everyone else, but gentle with her. She sets the rules. He draws the line at fear. Then a fake video drops, a car slams their convoy, and she disappears, just as the truth is about to burn the city clean. When the bullets stop, will one brave plea become the love that remakes his empire, or the spark that destroys them both? The scent of lemon cleaner couldn't mask the lingering sweetness of vanilla and butter that permeated Penny's small bakery. Her arms ached from mopping, but she kept at it, each stroke methodical as she tried to drown out the echo of her ex-manager's sneering voice. The numbers wouldn't add up, no matter how she arranged them in her head. The purr of a powerful engine drew her attention to the storefront windows. A black SUV, sleek and threatening, eased to the curb. Her heart skipped as 3 men emerged, 2 flanking a third, whose presence seemed to command the very air around him. The bell chimed as they entered. The leader moved with fluid grace, his dark suit impeccable. His eyes, sharp and assessing, took in every detail of the space before settling on her. Penelope Hart? "We're closed," she said, her voice steadier than her hands. "The ovens are off." "Valerio Costa?" He didn't offer his hand, maintaining a careful distance. "I'm here about your landlord's interests." Penny's grip tightened on the mop handle. She'd been expecting thugs, not this man who carried authority like a second skin. The fluorescent lights cast shadows across his angular features, highlighting cheekbones that could cut glass. "I can explain about the rent," she started, but something broke inside her. The day's humiliation, her ex-manager's cruel words about her body, her dreams, her worth, bubbled up. "Unless you want something else, just one night, to feel wanted." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Valerio's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "No." Simple, firm, final. He reached into his jacket and Penny flinched, but he only withdrew a phone. After a few taps, he showed her the screen. "Your debt is settled." "What? I don't understand." "Your landlord's operation is now mine, including all outstanding accounts." He glanced at his watch. "You should close up. There are men watching this place, waiting to collect, not my men." The mop clattered as it hit the floor. Penny's hands shook as she gathered her things, hyper-aware of Valerio's presence as he waited, his guards positioning themselves at the windows. The routine of shutting down, checking the proofer's hum, storing supplies, counting the register, felt surreal under his watchful gaze. The walk to her apartment was brief but tense. Valerio's hand hovered near her lower back, never touching but close enough to guide. One guard led the way, the other followed. The stairs creaked under their feet. Her tiny walk-up felt even smaller with Valerio inside. The cracked tile in her kitchenette seemed to mock her as she fumbled with her keys. Her security was laughable, a deadbolt and chain that wouldn't stop a determined intruder. "I'll stay until sunrise," Valerio stated, removing his jacket with precise movements. The gun holstered at his side gleamed dully in the cheap overhead light. He positioned the kitchen chair to face the door, his posture relaxed but alert. "You don't have to." "I do." He checked his phone, fingers moving swiftly over the screen. "Danger circles back. Always." Penny retreated to her couch, unable to relax but too exhausted to remain standing. The night stretched on, marked by the soft buzz of Valerio's phone receiving messages from someone he called his fixer. She dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every distant sound from the building. At 4:20 a.m., footsteps echoed in the stairwell, unfamiliar ones that made Valerio's hand drift to his holster. They passed by, fading away, but the tension remained. Penny watched through heavy lids as Valerio maintained his vigil, his profile sharp against the pre-dawn darkness, a guardian she never asked for but desperately needed. The small apartment felt like a bubble, suspended in time. The familiar sounds of her building, pipes groaning, the hum of her ancient refrigerator, distant sirens, created a strange symphony. Valerio's presence filled the space, somehow making her tiny home feel both safer and more dangerous. Her thoughts drifted to the bakery below, to the life she'd built from scratch. The display cases she'd scrubbed clean herself, the recipes perfected through countless attempts, the regular customers who brightened her mornings with their simple routines. All of it had nearly slipped through her fingers, saved by this dangerous man who'd refused her desperate offer but given her something more valuable: time, safety, a chance to breathe. The night air grew thick with unspoken words. Questions burned on her tongue. About him, about why he'd helped her, about what tomorrow would bring. But exhaustion pulled at her limbs, and Valerio's steady presence made her feel strangely secure despite everything. He remained motionless in the kitchen chair, his attention divided between his phone and the door. Occasionally, his gaze would sweep over her, checking, assessing. Each time, she felt the weight of it like a physical touch. The city sounds filtered through her thin walls: early morning delivery trucks, distant trains, the first stirrings of life as the world prepared to wake. But in her apartment, time seemed to move differently. Valerio's quiet breathing mixed with her own, creating a rhythm that made her eyelids grow heavier. She fought against sleep, wanting to maintain some control over this surreal situation. But her body betrayed her, and she found herself drifting, aware only of Valerio's silhouette against the pale light filtering through her windows, his gun a dark promise against his side, his phone casting a soft blue glow across his sharp features. Sunlight crept through Penny's thin curtains, and the rich aroma of coffee pulled her from sleep. For a moment, she forgot the previous night's events, until she saw Valerio in her kitchen, his broad shoulders turned to her as he poured coffee into her chipped French press. "I'm sorry," she blurted, sitting up and smoothing her wrinkled clothes. "About last night, what I asked—" "Shh, don't." His voice was quiet but firm as he brought her a mug. The coffee was perfect, strong and smooth, nothing like her usual rushed morning brew. Valerio leaned against her counter, his own cup untouched. "There's something you need to know. A rival capo, Riccardo Vanni, has been targeting civilians to draw me into public confrontations. Making scenes, forcing my hand." The name sent a chill through her. She'd heard whispers about Riccardo, none of them good. "Why are you telling me this?" A crackle from the guard's radio interrupted. "Sir, there's a mark on the window. Fresh paint, unfamiliar sigil, wasn't there last night?" Valerio's expression hardened. "Pack, 15 minutes, essentials only." Penny moved on autopilot, grabbing her worn leather work shoes and her mother's recipe box. A weathered tin filled with handwritten cards, each one a memory of better days. She stuffed 2 changes of clothes into her backpack, along with her phone charger. Her hands trembled as she zipped it closed. The morning sun felt too bright as they emerged from her building. The black SUV waited, engine running, guards scanning the street. Penny clutched her backpack to her chest as they drove through the awakening city, past coffee shops opening their doors and early morning joggers. The high-rise they arrived at stretched toward the clouds, all glass and steel. In the elevator, Valerio finally spoke. 72 hours maximum. There are rules." He listed them efficiently. Calls only from the penthouse landline, no social media, no leaving without security. "Your friend Bianca can be contacted, but only through secure channels. Staff will handle any groceries or supplies you need." The penthouse doors opened to a space that seemed to belong to another world. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city sprawling below, making Penny feel dizzy with height. The kitchen gleamed with unused appliances, and when she peeked into the guest suite, the linens looked as if they'd never been touched, creases from industrial pressing still visible. She wandered the space, feeling like an intruder in this sterile luxury. Everything was perfect, untouched, waiting. The counters were cold marble, the floors smooth hardwood that didn't creak like her apartment's worn boards. A far cry from her cozy bakery with its warm ovens and flour-dusted surfaces. Hours passed in a strange haze. Penny tried to read, to rest, to do anything but stare at the city below. The sun tracked across the sky, painting the clouds in deepening shades of pink and purple. As dusk settled over the city, casting everything in a soft lavender light, Valerio appeared in her doorway, jacket slung over his shoulder. "I have a meeting," he said, his dark eyes holding hers. "But first, I won't touch you without your explicit consent. Not again. Not ever." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Before Penny could respond, the elevator chimed. Valerio turned and walked away, his footsteps silent on the expensive flooring. Through the windows, she noticed a security camera on the building opposite, its lens rotating slowly until it faced her directly. The penthouse felt enormous and empty without him. Penny stood at the window, watching the city lights blink on one by one. The space around her was the safest she'd ever been, yet she felt more vulnerable than ever. The pristine kitchen mocked her. No familiar dents or scratches, no evidence of life or love or morning rushes to get the day's first batch of bread in the oven. She thought of her tiny apartment above the bakery, of the cracked tile she kept meaning to fix. of the way her old couch had molded to her shape through countless late nights. This place, with its perfect corners and untouched surfaces, was both sanctuary and cage. The security camera across the street remained fixed on her window, its presence a constant reminder that she wasn't just being protected. She was being watched. Penny wrapped her arms around herself, missing the comforting smell of yeast and butter that usually clung to her clothes. Here, everything smelled like nothing at all. She unpacked her few belongings, placing her mother's recipe box on the pristine nightstand. The familiar dents and scratches on its surface stood out against the room's perfection, like her, a touch of reality in this surreal situation. Her work shoes, dusty with flour, looked out of place on the spotless floor. The city continued its evening routine far below. People rushing home from work, cars honking, life moving forward while she stood suspended in this glass tower. The penthouse phone sat silent on its cradle, waiting for her to make the call to Bianca, to try to explain what she barely understood herself. Darkness settled over the city, and Penny's reflection grew clearer in the window glass. She looked small against the backdrop of lights, a baker in a billionaire's fortress, wrapped up in something bigger than she could comprehend. The security camera's red light blinked steadily, watching, waiting, as night claimed the city. The digital clock on the pristine oven blinked 4:03 a.m. In the dim light of the penthouse kitchen. Penny sifted through cabinets until she found what she needed: flour, yeast, salt. Her fingers trembled as she pulled her mother's recipe box from her backpack, selecting a worn note card labeled Mom's Milk Bread in familiar, faded handwriting. The kitchen's silence wrapped around her like a blanket as she measured ingredients into a bowl. This at least was familiar. The soft puff of flour, the earthy smell of yeast blooming in warm water. Her hands knew this dance, even here in this strange place. "Can't sleep?" Valerio's voice startled her, but she didn't drop the measuring cup. He stood in the kitchen doorway, tie gone, sleeves rolled to reveal strong forearms. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, speaking of countless nights like this one. "I needed to do something useful," Penny said, turning back to her bowl. "The kettle's just boiled if you want tea." He moved through the kitchen with surprising grace for such a powerful man, preparing 2 cups while she began kneading the dough. The repetitive motion soothed her nerves. Push, fold, turn, push, fold, turn. "Insomnia's an old friend," Valerio said quietly, setting a cup near her elbow. "Years of it." Penny worked the dough, noting how he watched her hands. "Is that why you're up? Insomnia?" "That and other ghosts." His voice dropped lower. "Once I was supposed to protect someone, a witness. He paused, fingers tightening on his cup. Too late. The raw edge in his voice made Penny's hands still on the dough. She looked up, meeting his gaze directly. Where others might have seen only danger in those dark eyes, she saw something else. Old pain, carefully guarded. She held his look, refusing to flinch. "And you've never forgiven yourself." "No." The single word hung between them as Penny shaped the dough into a smooth ball, setting it to rise. She wiped her hands on a towel, opened her mouth to respond. The glass behind them exploded with light. Gunfire shattered the pre-dawn silence. Before Penny could process what was happening, Valerio slammed into her, driving them both behind the breakfast bar. His body covered hers as bullets pinged harmlessly off the security glass. Engines roared below, tires screaming against pavement as the attackers fled. Valerio's hand pressed firmly against Penny's lower back, holding her still until the echoes faded. His heartbeat thundered against her shoulder, the only sign of his tension. "Stay down," he ordered, already reaching for his phone. Security confirmed no breach, but their voices crackled with new urgency when they reported a fresh sigil painted on the curb, the same mark from her apartment. Penny pushed herself to sitting, flour dusting her sleep clothes. "If I'm staying here, I need to be useful." Her voice shook slightly, but her chin lifted. "Let me cook for your security team. Give me something to do besides hide and wait." Valerio studied her for a long moment. "The kitchen is yours. But you don't leave this floor." "Fair enough." She stood, brushing off her knees. "I'm also writing a cleaning schedule. This place needs a human touch." His eyebrow lifted slightly. "The staff needs someone to notice their people, not furniture." Penny checked her rising dough, punched it down with perhaps more force than necessary. When was the last time anyone thanked them? The morning unfolded in a blur of activity. Penny shaped rolls, cleaned as she worked, and learned the names of every security guard who rotated through. By afternoon, the sterile penthouse carried the warm scent of fresh bread. As the sun began to set, 3 grim-faced guards stood awkwardly in the kitchen while Penny loaded their plates with still steaming rolls. The first bite transformed their expressions. Suspicious too, surprised to something almost like pleasure. "My nonna used to make bread like this," the youngest guard admitted, reaching for another roll. From the hallway, Valerio watched silently. His jaw tightened as he observed the scene, his hardened security team softening around the edges, won over by simple kindness and warm bread. Penny moved among them with easy grace, remembering names, asking about families. She was building loyalty with flour and butter, creating connections he couldn't force with all his power and threats. These men would die for him out of duty, but for her, they might live. The kitchen had transformed. Penny had wiped down surfaces until they gleamed, arranged cooking tools for efficiency, posted a cleaning schedule that included rotation of fresh flowers and regular dusting of ceiling corners. Small touches that made the space feel lived in, cared for. She'd turned his fortress into something approaching a home, and done it in less than a day. Even the guards moved differently here now, more alert because they were protecting something real, not just following orders. Valerio remained in the shadow of the doorway, watching Penny demonstrate the proper way to tear a roll to release the steam. Her hands moved with confidence, flour still dusting her arms. When she smiled at the guard's appreciation, it transformed her whole face. She was dangerous in ways he hadn't anticipated. Not with violence or schemes, but with this gift for making people feel seen, appreciated, for creating warmth in cold places. His men would fight harder knowing she waited above with fresh bread and genuine concern for their well-being. The setting sun painted the kitchen in soft gold, catching the flower motes dancing in the air. For a moment, the space felt enchanted. The warm light, the fresh bread smell, the sound of genuine laughter from men who rarely smiled. At the center of it all, Penny moved with quiet purpose, already planning tomorrow's baking schedule. She'd found her own kind of power here, and Valerio wasn't sure whether to be impressed or terrified. Morning light streamed through the lobby's glass walls as Penny smoothed her borrowed blazer, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. The legal appointment loomed, and her stomach churned with nerves. "Underground routes blocked," the head of security reported, his earpiece chirping with updates. "Construction crew hit a water main. We'll need to exit through the front." Valerio's expression hardened. "Clear the perimeter first." Penny watched the practice formation as guards swept outside, their movements precise. When they finally stepped through the revolving doors, camera flashes erupted like lightning. "Mr. Costa, over here! Who's the woman? This way, please!" The paparazzi swarmed, held back only by Valerio's security team. Penny kept her head high, grateful for Valerio's steady hand at her lower back as they moved toward the waiting car. More photos snapped, capturing her curves in the tailored suit, her face clearly visible, despite her best efforts to angle away. By afternoon, her image was everywhere. Headlines screamed speculation. Costa's mystery woman. Power player's new romance. Mafia Don's latest obsession. In the penthouse's private office, Mireille Shen laid out stark realities. The lawyer's precise movements matched her clipped tone as she outlined new protocols. "No independent movement," Mireille stated, sliding papers across the desk. "Check-ins every 2 hours using these codes. Memorize them." Penny scanned the document, noting the patterns. "And if I'm forced to communicate under threat?" "Use this phrase." Mireille pointed to a seemingly innocent sentence. "Missing my mother's kitchen." It signals duress without alerting the captors. "I need to see Bianca," Penny insisted, meeting Mireille's sharp gaze. "Just once, supervised, to make sure she's safe." Mireille glanced at Valerio, who had been silently watching from beside the window. After a long moment, he nodded. "We'll arrange it." The day's news cycle churned relentlessly. Every channel seemed to feature Penny's photo, dissecting her appearance, speculating about her relationship with one of the city's most dangerous men. Social media exploded with theories and threats. Valerio paced the office, phone pressed to his ear as reports poured in. Each call seemed to darken his expression further. Finally, he turned to Penny. "The exposure makes you a target," he said, voice gravelly with tension. "We can't maintain deniability now." "What does that mean for me?" Penny asked, though she suspected she already knew. Valerio moved to stand before her, his presence filling the room. "It means you need official protection, my name, my security." He withdrew a black keycard from his jacket. Full access to the penthouse systems, no more temporary status. The card felt heavy in Penny's palm. She understood the weight of what he offered. Protection, yes, but also irrevocable connection to his world. The bakery, she started, but couldn't finish the thought. Would be a liability now, Mireille cut in gently. Your old routines are compromised. Hours later, as evening painted the sky in deep purples, Penny stood barefoot in the penthouse living room. The heated floors warmed her soles as she gazed out at the glittering cityscape. Each light represented a life continuing normally, while hers transformed beyond recognition. Her phone buzzed with another news alert. Another photo, another speculation about her role in Valerio's empire. The bakery's morning shift would start in a few hours, but she wouldn't be there to proof the dough or greet her regular customers. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching her breath fog the surface. The black keycard sat on the coffee table behind her, both promise and prison. She could no longer pretend this was temporary, that she'd return to her old life without endangering everyone she cared about. The security team moved quietly through their rounds, their presence both comforting and confining. In the kitchen, she could hear someone preparing dinner, another change, as the staff now worked later to accommodate their protectee's nocturnal schedule. Penny's reflection stared back at her, transformed by the designer clothes that had appeared in her closet. She looked expensive, protected. The woman in the glass belonged in this tower of steel and privilege, even if Penny still felt like an imposter. A guard discreetly cleared his throat. Ms. Hart, Mr. Costa asked if you'd like dinner in the main dining room or your suite. Such simple questions now carried layers of security implications. Even meal locations required strategic consideration. The dining room, she decided. If she was going to live in this fishbowl, she wouldn't hide in her room. The city lights winked like stars, mapping out all the places she could no longer safely go. Her little apartment above the bakery, the corner market where she bought day-old flowers, the park where she and Bianca used to meet for coffee. Each light represented a choice closing, a door locking. The world had shrunk to this gilded cage, with Valerio as both jailer and protector. She couldn't even resent him for it. He'd tried to maintain her anonymity, to give her choices. The media had made that impossible. Her old life, with its simple rhythms of baking and bills, felt like a dream. Now she existed in headlines and whispered rumors, her image a commodity for public consumption. The only way forward was through, accepting the protection that came with its own kind of price. A light flicked on in the dining room behind her, staff preparing for dinner service. Penny squared her shoulders, turning away from the window. She might be trapped in this new life, but she would face it standing tall. At precisely 9 a.m, Mireille Shen's office hummed with quiet efficiency. The leather chairs creaked as Penny settled in, watching the printer spit out crisp pages of legal documents. Morning sun filtered through vertical blinds, casting lines across the polished desk. Let's be clear about your rights, Mireille said, arranging papers with practiced precision. This is a temporary protection contract, emphasis on temporary. You maintain full medical autonomy. Penny picked up the first page, scanning the dense text. And inside the residence? There are necessary security measures, Mireille acknowledged, but you can establish boundaries, private spaces where surveillance is limited or revocable at your discretion. I want everything in writing, Penny insisted. No verbal agreements. Mireille's lips curved slightly. Smart girl. She pulled out another document. Here's the surveillance clause. You can revoke non-essential monitoring with 24 hours notice. They spent an hour going through each section. Penny asked questions, demanded clarifications, and initialed every page. Her hand cramped from signing, but she felt more grounded with each formal acknowledgement of her rights. By 2 o'clock, Penny stood outside Bianca's studio apartment, 2 guards flanking her. She clutched a box of fresh pastries and a small package containing the burner phone. The hallway smelled of curry from the restaurant downstairs. Bianca flung open the door before Penny could knock. Girl, get in here! She pulled Penny into a fierce hug, eyeing the guards warily. You brought your own entourage, huh? Inside, sunlight streamed through Bianca's paint-splattered windows. The small space burst with color, canvases stacked against walls, dried flowers hanging from strings, cushions scattered everywhere. You're all over the news, Bianca said, accepting a cream-filled pastry. Looking fancy with your man. He's not my... Penny started, then stopped. What exactly was Valerio to her now? Speaking of news, Bianca continued, licking sugar from her fingers. Seeing you reminded me of something. Your mom used to keep books for some neighborhood service, right? Collections or something? Penny froze mid-bite. What? Yeah, I almost forgot until I saw you on TV. Remember how she always had those little notebooks? People would come by, real quiet-like, and she'd check her ledgers. Before Penny could process this revelation, movement caught her eye through the window. A group of young men in black masks approached the building's opposite wall, spray cans glinting. The guards tensed, hands moving to weapons. One spoke quietly into his radio as the youths began painting. The familiar sigil emerged in violent red strokes. A bottle arced through the air, glass glinting. It shattered on the wet pavement, contents splashing harmlessly. Penny's hands trembled as she set down her pastry. "Status report," Valerio's voice came through her earpiece, steady and calm. "Just vandalism," she managed, voice shaking. "Some kids with spray paint." "Breathe, Penny. Security is en route. You're safe." His voice anchored her, and gradually her hands steadied. The masked figures scattered as sirens wailed in the distance. "Time to go." "One," guard announced, already checking sightlines through windows. Penny hugged Bianca goodbye, pressing the burner phone into her hand. "Call me. The number's inside." Back at the penthouse, twilight painted the sky in deepening blues. Penny channeled her nervous energy into practical tasks, writing a detailed list at the kitchen counter. The last item made her pause. Her mother's recipe box sat on the counter, its wooden surface worn smooth from years of use. She'd never questioned why some cards seemed thicker than others, or why the divider seemed so firmly fixed. At 10:15 p.m., the penthouse settled into night routine. Guards changed shifts quietly. The city glowed beyond windows. Penny sat alone at the kitchen island, fingers tracing the box's familiar edges. She lifted it, and something shifted beneath the divider, a soft, distinctive rattle she'd never noticed before. The sound echoed in the quiet kitchen, raising questions about what else her mother might have left behind. The metal handles felt cool against her palms as she stared at the box, wondering what secrets lay hidden beneath years of flour-dusted recipe cards and handwritten notes. Her mother's ledgers were gone, but maybe she'd left other traces, other clues about the neighborhood's shadow economy. The kitchen's overhead lights hummed softly. A guard's footsteps passed in the hallway, regular as a metronome. Penny's fingers hovered over the divider she'd never thought to remove, considering the weight of what she might discover. The city stretched out below, a maze of lights and shadows, secrets and systems. Somewhere in those streets, someone was painting threatening symbols, sending messages. And here in her hands, a box that might hold answers about her mother's quiet role in the neighborhood's delicate balance of power. A clock on the wall ticked steadily. The recipe box waited, its contents shifting ever so slightly when she moved it. Whatever lay beneath that divider could change everything, or nothing at all. For now, it remained another piece in the puzzle of her new reality, where every object might hold double meanings, and even family heirlooms carried unexpected weight. At 7:15 a.m., morning light spilled across the penthouse kitchen table as Penny held her mother's recipe box. Her fingers traced the worn edges before carefully turning it over. A slight irregularity in the wood caught her attention, a seam so fine she'd never noticed it before. Heart-pounding, she worked her fingernail into the groove. The false bottom lifted with a soft click, revealing a small cavity lined with faded bakery parchment. Inside lay a flash drive, unremarkable except for a smudged initial written in her mother's distinctive hand. "Marie," Penny said into her phone, keeping her voice steady. "I found something." The lawyer arrived within 20 minutes, carrying a sleek laptop and what looked like a specialized USB reader. Her heels clicked against the hardwood as she sat up, at the kitchen table. "Air-gapped system," Mireille explained, connecting the reader. "No network access, no way to trace the data." The flash drive's contents loaded slowly. Folders appeared, dated and labeled with meticulous care. Penny recognized her mother's organizational style, the same precise system she'd used for recipe testing and inventory. But these weren't recipes. "These are ledgers," Mireille said, scrolling through spreadsheet after spreadsheet. Names, dates, payment amounts, notes in a simple code that nonetheless painted a clear picture. Protection money, kickbacks, extortion schemes. Penny's throat tightened as she spotted her landlord's name. The payments tracked back years, showing a pattern of squeezing out small business owners who couldn't or wouldn't pay. And behind it all, a familiar name kept appearing: Riccardo Vanni. "Your mother was documenting everything," Mireille said softly. "Building a case." The morning stretched into afternoon as they combed through the files. Valerio joined them, his presence both reassuring and concerning as he studied the evidence. "This changes things," he said finally, looking at Penny. "You're not just caught in the crossfire anymore. You're holding proof of Vanni's operations." "I won't hide," Penny said, lifting her chin. No, he agreed, but you'll train. He outlined a new schedule, his tone leaving no room for argument. Physical therapy at 2. You need to process the stress chemicals. Defensive awareness at 4. Dinner at 6:30, after dark hourly check-ins. The gym session left Penny's muscles trembling but her mind clearer. The trainer, a former fighter with gentle hands, showed her how to fall safely, how to break holds, how to use her body's natural mechanics to her advantage. At 4, another specialist taught her to scan rooms, identify exits, recognize the 1,000 small details that might signal danger. Awareness, he emphasized, is your first line of defense. Evening brought a new tension. The garage level felt especially cold as Penny and Valerio headed for the elevator after a security briefing. A cleaning cart stood near the threshold, mop bucket positioned oddly. "Wait," Valerio said sharply, pulling Penny back. He spoke rapidly into his radio while security swept the area. The bucket shouldn't have been there. No cleaning staff were scheduled. Penny's heart hammered as they finally stepped into the elevator. The doors closed with a soft chime, leaving them alone in the small space. Her hands shook with leftover adrenaline, and she reached out instinctively to steady herself against Valerio's arm. He turned toward her, and the air changed. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheek. When he kissed her, it was both gentle and desperate, as if he'd been holding himself back for days. Penny melted into him, tasting coffee and mint and need. His other hand settled at her waist, pulling her closer. The elevator hummed around them, a cocoon of steel and warmth. Then he pulled back, just enough to rest his forehead against hers. "Not like this," he whispered, voice rough. "Not with fear riding our shoulders. Your first time should be about want, not adrenaline." Their breathing filled the small space, quick and fierce. The elevator chimed again, doors opening to their floor. Neither moved for a moment, still wrapped in each other's heat. Finally, they stepped out together, not speaking. The taste of him lingered on her lips, a promise of something both dangerous and inevitable. The scent of metal from the elevator clung to her clothes, mingling with his cologne and the ghost of their shared breath. Security cameras tracked their movement down the hallway, but Penny barely noticed. Her body hummed with awareness of him beside her, so close their shoulders nearly touched. The flash drive's weight in her pocket reminded her of why they were here, why everything had changed. Her mother's careful documentation had given them a weapon against Vani, but it had also painted a target on Penny's back. The day's training sat in her muscles like a new language. How to fall, how to fight, how to survive. And now this kiss, this moment of pure wanting, added another layer to her transformation. The penthouse door opened to familiar security checks and evening routines. Guards changed shifts with quiet efficiency. City lights sparkled beyond bulletproof glass. Penny touched her lips, still feeling the press of Valerio's mouth, the careful restraint in his hands. She understood his decision to wait, to ensure their first time wouldn't be tangled with fear and reaction. It spoke to the same control she'd seen in him from the beginning, the ability to hold back, to choose the right moment, to protect what mattered most. The evidence hidden in her mother's recipe box had changed the game, but this growing thing between her and Valerio had its own gravity, its own inevitable pull. And for now, that was enough. Afternoon sun slanted through the museum's grand windows, casting long shadows across marble floors. Penny adjusted the strap of her black dress, chosen for its modest cut and easy movement, and watched Valerio work the room. His presence here was calculated, a show of strength to silence whispers of vulnerability. Security teams blended seamlessly with the well-dressed crowd, their earpieces catching light. Penny kept her hair firmly pinned back, reducing her profile just as she'd been taught. Her eyes constantly scanned the space, noting exits and choke points, the new awareness becoming second nature. "Mr. Costa," a donor called, waving Valerio over. "We missed you at the symphony fundraiser." Penny observed how he navigated the social current, maintaining perfect control while appearing completely at ease. She sipped water, declining champagne to stay sharp, and counted the guards positioned around the perimeter. The first hint of trouble came as a subtle flicker in the chandelier lights. Most guests didn't notice, but Penny saw Valerio's shoulders tense. His security detail shifted, hands moving toward concealed weapons. Then the lights cut completely. Emergency generators kicked in as 3 armed men burst through the service entrance. Screams erupted, guests scattered like startled birds, crystal glasses shattering on marble. "Nobody move!" one intruder shouted, his accent thick with tension. Penny's heart hammered as she pressed against a column, remembering her training. "Stay low, look for cover, watch the exits." A child's cry pierced the chaos. One of the gunmen had grabbed a small boy, maybe 6 years old, using him as a shield. The boy's mother screamed, held back by another guest. Valerio moved like water. In 3 smooth steps, he cleared his line of sight. His weapon appeared as if conjured from air. The gunshot crack echoed off marble walls, precise and devastating. The man holding the child dropped, a clean headshot. The boy ran to his mother as security swarmed the remaining intruders. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Penny's hands shook as she processed what she'd witnessed. Not disgust at Valerio's actions. He'd saved that child without hesitation, but bone-deep recognition of this new world she'd entered, a world where violence and protection were 2 sides of the same coin. Security began herding guests toward emergency exits. Valerio appeared at her side, one hand at the small of her back. "Are you all right?" She met his eyes and made her choice. Instead of pulling away, she gripped his hand tightly. "Let's go!" They moved efficiently through the evacuation routes, Penny's heels clicking on polished floors. Outside, rain had started to fall, beating on the armored car's black surface. Inside the vehicle, Valerio maintained careful distance. His face was composed, but Penny read tension in his jaw, in the way his fingers rested near his holster. He expected her to recoil, to finally see him as the dangerous man others feared. Penny shifted closer instead. She reached up to cup his face, feeling the slight roughness of evening stubble under her palm. "I'm not afraid of you," she said softly. "I'm terrified of losing you." Something raw flickered in his eyes. His hand came up to cover hers, warm and calloused. They sat in silence as the car wound through rain-slicked streets, the city lights blurring into watercolor streaks. More vehicles joined their convoy, advance teams, follow cars, visible security. Penny watched droplets race down bulletproof glass, thinking how quickly her world had changed. A week ago, she'd been counting coins in her bakery register. Now she was watching a man she cared for take lives to protect innocence. The garage ramp appeared ahead, concrete walls funneling them down into artificial light. As they descended, Penny made another choice. She leaned into Valerio's side, resting her head on his shoulder. Not from exhaustion or fear, but as a deliberate declaration. She felt his subtle intake of breath, the way his arm curved to accommodate her. The digital display showed 11:40 p.m. as their convoy reached the secure level. Rain dripped from wheel wells, forming dark pools on concrete. Guards took positions, efficient and alert, while the city wept above them. Penny stayed close to Valerio as they exited the vehicle. Her dress whispered against his suit jacket, and she could smell gunpowder mixed with his cologne. The evening's violence hung between them, acknowledged but not defining. The elevator waited, its polished doors reflecting their image. Her in modest black, him in tailored darkness, together despite every reason they shouldn't be. Security moved around them like a well-choreographed dance, maintaining protective formations. More than ever, Penny understood the weight of choice. She'd stepped into this world with open eyes, watching a man balance brutality with protection. The child's cry still echoed in her memory, followed by the decisive crack of Valerio's shot. There was no going back to her simpler life of bread and butter and morning light through bakery windows. But as they ascended toward the penthouse, Penny knew she didn't want to go back. This new reality, dangerous and complex as it was, had become her truth. And the man beside her, capable of both violence and tenderness, had become essential to her world. Rain continued to fall outside, washing the city clean of the evening's events. Inside, surrounded by steel and security, Penny maintained her position against Valerio's shoulder. Every moment was a choice, and she kept choosing him. Morning sun streamed through the penthouse windows as the elevator chimed. Bianca stepped out, flanked by 2 of Valerio's men. Her arms cradled Penny's recipe box, its worn corners catching the light. "Found something you need to see," Bianca said, setting the box on the kitchen island. "Noticed fresh scrape marks on your old apartment door frame this morning. Figured I should bring everything back personally." Penny's heart quickened. "Fresh marks?" "Someone tried getting in. Don't worry, your neighbor Mrs. Martinez called it in." Bianca opened the box, carefully spreading out the recipe cards. "But it got me thinking about what else might need protecting." Mireille appeared from the office, tablet in hand. She watched with sharp eyes as Penny and Bianca examined the box. "Wait," Penny said, running her fingers along the inside of the lid. "There's something?" She pressed gently, feeling an irregularity beneath the paper lining. Working carefully, she peeled back one corner. A folded receipt slipped free, yellowed with age. Penny's hands trembled as she opened it. The date jumped out immediately. The night her mother died. "Let me see that," Mireille said, reaching for the receipt. She typed rapidly on her tablet, cross-referencing with the flash drive's contents. Her normally composed expression shifted. "This receipt number? It matches an entry from the night your mother passed. But there's more." She turned the tablet so they could see. "These timestamps, combined with other entries, your mother was gathering evidence against Ricardo's mentor. She was planning to turn informant that night." Penny sank onto a kitchen stool, processing. Her mother hadn't just kept books. She'd tried to expose corruption, had died trying to protect their neighborhood. "She was so brave," Bianca whispered, squeezing Penny's shoulder. "Always looking out for everyone else." Penny straightened, wiping her eyes. "Then we'll honor her today, the way she'd want." She moved to the refrigerator, pulling out ingredients. "I'm cooking for everyone, the whole security team." The afternoon unfolded in a gentle rhythm of chopping, sautéing, and sharing stories. Penny made her mother's signature dishes, tender meatballs, enriched tomato sauce, crusty bread, and lemon cookies that filled the penthouse with warmth. Guards rotated through in shifts, accepting plates with surprised gratitude. Even Mireille paused her work to join them, perching on a bar stool while drafting plans to get the ledger evidence to federal contacts. "We'll need an airtight chain of custody," she explained between bites. "Multiple authenticated copies, secure channels. This has to be handled perfectly." The sun began its descent, painting the city in amber and rose. Security did their evening sweeps while Penny packed leftovers for the night shift. Later, she found Valerio in the living room, jacket off, shoulder holster, visible against his white shirt. Without speaking, she sat beside him on the floor, their backs against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Their knees touched, a point of warmth in the cooling evening. "I want you to come to my bed," Penny said softly, watching the city lights flicker on. "But not yet. Not while we're surrounded by guards and warnings and steel. I want our first time to be just us. No sirens, no threats." Valerio turned to face her, his expression intense. "I'll dismantle Ricardo's entire operation first. Make it safe for us." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "You deserve that peace." They sat together as darkness settled, the city spreading below like a blanket of stars. Finally, Penny stood, retrieving the thin steel lockbox Mireille had provided. She placed the flash drive inside, its contents now backed up through secure channels. Moving to the kitchen, she located the ventilation panel behind the stove, a hiding spot already vetted by security. Valerio watched as she slid the lockbox into the cubby. They'd both memorized its location, and Mireille had logged it in her encrypted files. One more secret held in the walls of this steel and glass fortress. Penny replaced the panel, thinking of her mother's courage, of choices made and prices paid. The evidence was secure now, protected by the same man who'd first stepped into her bakery, that midnight hour that felt like years ago. The night shift guards moved through their rounds, radios crackling quietly. In the kitchen, dishes dried in racks, leftover cookies cooling on wire stands, signs of life and care in a space designed for security. Bianca had left hours ago, escorted home by Valerio's most trusted men. The recipe box sat on the counter, its hidden compartments now empty of secrets but full of history. Tomorrow they would transfer its contents to a safer location, preserving her mother's actual recipes while protecting the evidence they'd discovered. Mireille worked late in the office, the soft click of her keyboard a steady rhythm as she constructed the chains of custody that would eventually bring Ricardo down. Her dedication matched Penny's mother's. Different methods, same goal of exposing corruption. Through the windows, the city continued its endless pulse of light and shadow. Somewhere out there, Ricardo moved his pieces across an invisible board, unaware that a dead woman's courage had armed them with the tools to end his game. But here in the penthouse, Penny found moments of peace between the tension. She moved through the space that had become both sanctuary and cage, marking time with small rituals. The morning coffee, the evening security checks, the quiet moments when Valerio's presence meant safety instead of restriction. She touched the ventilation panel one last time, a silent promise to her mother's memory. The evidence was secure, the players in motion. Now they would wait, plan, and protect, until the moment came to act. Valerio's phone buzzed at 4:45 a.m., the screen lighting up with urgent messages. He read them twice, jaw tightening, then moved silently to dress. "What's wrong?" Penny asked from her doorway, already alert despite the early hour. "Ricardo bought your old building. Mass evictions ordered." He holstered his gun with practiced efficiency. "We're moving the tenants out before his men arrive." By sunrise, the street hummed with quiet activity. Vans lined the curb, while Valerio's crews helped elderly residents downstairs, carried children's belongings and loaded furniture with careful hands. Penny recognized faces: Mrs. Chen from 2B, who always saved day-old newspapers, the Rodriguez family, whose twins used to wave through her bakery window. Everyone gets temporary housing, Valerio explained, checking manifests as families boarded vehicles. Paid through a clean channel untraceable to me. Penny watched a young mother clutching a baby carrier, dark circles under her eyes. They're losing their homes because of me. Because of Ricardo, Valerio corrected. This is his pattern, civilian pressure points. By mid-morning, the evacuation was complete. Penny returned to the penthouse while Valerio's charitable foundation processed housing vouchers. She tried to focus on organizing the kitchen, but her hands shook when she thought of empty apartments where children once played. The afternoon sun cast long shadows when shouts erupted from the street. Penny moved to the window, spotting a cluster of men arguing loudly, drawing attention. Before she could process the scene, a mechanical whir caught her ear. "Down!" The security tech's voice crackled through the intercom. "Drone at your 2 o'clock." Penny dropped flat beneath the windowsill, heart pounding, as the buzz grew closer. She could picture the drone hovering, its camera seeking targets through the glass. "Signal jammed," the tech reported. "Drone's veering off course now." She stayed down until the whirring faded, then sat up slowly. Her hands were steady now, but something had shifted inside her. The constant reactive stance, ducking, hiding, waiting for the next threat, felt suddenly unbearable. Evening settled over the city like a heavy blanket. Penny showered, changed, and found Valerio reviewing security footage in the living room. She watched him for a moment, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers moved over tactical reports with controlled precision. "Come to bed," she said softly. He looked up, expression carefully neutral. "Penny?" "Not for that. Just come with me." In her room, streetlights painted patterns on the wall. Penny stepped close, sliding her hands up his chest to link behind his neck. When she kissed him, he responded with controlled heat, hands settling at her waist. The kiss deepened, became something more urgent. Buttons came undone, fabric whispered against skin. But at the threshold of no return, Valerio pulled back slightly, studying her face. "Are you certain? Now?" Penny pressed her forehead to his chest, breathing in his scent of gunmetal and expensive cologne. "I want you. But I want our first time to be just us. No threats waiting in the wings, no fear pacing outside our door." "When this war ends," he agreed, voice rough with restraint and devotion. They lay down together, fully clothed, facing each other on top of her bedding. His hand found hers in the darkness, thumb brushing over her knuckles in a gentle rhythm. "Tell me something true," Penny whispered. "I've never wanted to protect anyone the way I want to protect you." "Another truth, I'm tired of being protected. I want to fight back." His grip tightened slightly. "We will. Together." They talked softly as night faded to dawn, about childhoods, favorite books, small desires like morning coffee and warm bread, normal things that felt precious in their abnormal world. As pink light touched the horizon, their words grew slower, sleepier. Penny watched Valerio's eyes drift closed, his dangerous hands gentle where they held hers. Their breathing fell into sync, a shared rhythm of trust in the quiet morning. The city stirred to life outside, traffic building, early workers hurrying past. In temporary apartments across town, displaced families were waking to unfamiliar rooms, their lives disrupted by a war they never chose. In his own territory, Ricardo was likely planning his next move, unaware that each escalation only strengthened the bonds he sought to break. But here in this room, Penny and Valerio slept peacefully for the first time in days. Their weapons and worries set aside for a few precious hours, they held on to this moment of simple human connection. Two people choosing each other despite the dangers, finding rest in the eye of the storm. The morning sun crept higher, warming the room. Security teams changed shifts in the hallway, their footsteps muffled and careful. Phones buzzed quietly with messages that could wait. For now, there was only the soft sound of shared breaths, the tangle of fingers, and the promise of what would come when the battle was finally won. Dawn painted the sky in gentle colors, a reminder that even the darkest nights eventually yield to light. Penny's face relaxed in sleep, free for once from worry. Beside her, Valerio's usual alertness softened into something more vulnerable, more human. Their bodies curved toward each other instinctively, seeking comfort and proximity. Outside these walls, danger still lurked in shadows and signals, in drones and desperate men. But in this moment, peace found them anyway, in shared breath, in gentle touch, in the choice to wait for joy untainted by fear. The acrid smell of burnt toast pierced through Penny's morning haze. She blinked awake, registering Mireille's tense voice from the kitchen. The usually composed lawyer was speaking in clipped tones that made Penny's stomach tighten. "The footage is everywhere," Mireille was saying. "Social media is having a field day." Penny padded to the hallway, stopping short when she heard more voices. Through the gap in the door, she saw Valerio standing with his back to her, shoulders rigid as he watched something on a tablet. The grainy video showed what appeared to be Penny meeting Ricardo in a dimly lit parking lot by the river. Even from a distance, she could tell it was heavily edited. The movements were jerky, unnatural. "She's compromised," one of Valerio's lieutenants said, his voice hard. "Cut her loose before this gets worse." "The appearance of betrayal is sometimes more damaging than actual betrayal," another added. "You need to distance yourself now." Penny's chest constricted. The doctored footage was clever, just believable enough to plant seeds of doubt. She watched Valerio's hands tighten on the tablet, his knuckles white. A plan formed in her mind. She wouldn't let Ricardo drive a wedge between them with fake videos. If he wanted a target, she'd give him one, but on her terms. She found Bianca in the guest suite, already dressed and checking her phone. "I need your help," Penny said, explaining her idea quickly. Within an hour, they had Mireille's reluctant approval for a supervised trip to collect personal items from Bianca's apartment. The lawyer promised to file the proper notification, though Penny suspected she'd prioritize other fires first. At 2:15 p.m., Penny and Bianca left in separate cars, a black sedan for Penny, a silver SUV for her friend. Rain had started falling, dotting the windows and making the city look like an impressionist painting. Penny watched the familiar street slide by, noting how different everything looked from behind bulletproof glass. The flash drive was safe in the kitchen vent, and she carried nothing that could compromise Valerio's operation. If something went wrong, she'd be a dead end. At 3:00 p.m., they approached the traffic circle near the old market district. The first hint of trouble was a horn blaring. Then the world exploded into motion. A box truck seemed to materialize from nowhere, ramming into Bianca's SUV with devastating force. Penny's driver cursed, yanking the wheel hard to avoid the collision. Through the chaos, she glimpsed Bianca's vehicle accelerating away, the driver executing a perfect escape maneuver. But they weren't so lucky. Another vehicle boxed them in from behind, while the truck reversed to block their front. Penny had a split second to register the familiar sigil painted on its side before rough hands were dragging her out into the rain. Someone shoved a hood over her head. The fabric smelled of motor oil and cigarettes. She fought instinctively, landing one solid kick before someone grabbed her legs. "The boss wants to talk," a voice growled in her ear. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." They bundled her into what felt like another truck. Her shoulders slammed against something metal as the vehicle lurched forward. Through the hood, she could hear horns honking, engines revving, the sounds of the city continuing as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, Bianca's car had made it 6 blocks before pulling into an underground garage. She memorized everything she could see. The partial address, reflected in a traffic mirror, the blood-smeared license plate that had fallen from one of the attacking vehicles. At 3:42 p.m., Bianca burst through the doors of Valerio's war room. Rain dripped from her clothes onto the expensive carpet. Her chest heaved as she slammed the bloody license plate onto the mahogany table. "Corner of Marshall and 12th," she gasped out. "There was a reflector sign. I saw the street numbers in it when they took her." The room erupted into motion. Valerio's men reached for phones and tablets, coordinating responses with practiced efficiency. But Bianca's eyes were locked on Valerio himself, noting how still he had become, like a predator preparing to strike. The rain continued to fall outside, washing away tire tracks and blood, carrying secrets into storm drains. In the kitchen, the flash drive sat undisturbed in its hiding place, waiting to reveal its truths. And somewhere in the city, a black hood still covered Penny's face as her captors drove toward an uncertain destination. The war room hummed with urgent activity, tactical maps spread across. Tables, surveillance feeds, cycling on mounted screens, voices coordinating in multiple languages. But at the center of it all stood Valerio, his expression carved from stone as he absorbed the reality of Penny's capture. Bianca watched him carefully, remembering how Penny had described his capacity for calculated violence. Now she understood what her friend meant: the careful control, the coiled power, the absolute certainty that someone would pay dearly for this transgression. The license plate lay on the table between them, its blood-streaked surface reflecting the overhead lights. It was a small piece of evidence, but sometimes small things were enough to start an avalanche. As thunder rolled outside, Bianca could feel the storm building in the room, not just rain and lightning, but the gathering force of retribution. The clock on the wall showed 3:42 p.m., each tick marking another moment Penny spent in enemy hands. But time was moving differently for everyone now, stretching like taffy for the captured, racing like lightning for the rescuers, freezing into crystal for those caught in between. Valerio stripped off his tie and rolled up his sleeves, transforming from polished dawn to warrior in seconds. The war room thrummed with controlled chaos as he issued rapid-fire commands through his encrypted phone. "I want every safe house checked," he ordered, his voice carrying the promise of violence. "Start with the warehouses near the port, then the old factory district." His men deployed in waves, their movements precise and practiced. Screens flickered with surveillance feeds, while tactical maps spread across tables showed the city grid marked with potential locations. Marco, his head of intelligence, approached with a tablet. "Boss, we've got eyes on Ricardo's banker. He's alone at his club." Valerio's jaw tightened. "Patch me through." The banker's face appeared on screen, sweating in the dim light of an exclusive cigar lounge. Valerio's voice cut through the connection like a blade. "Your offshore accounts in the Caymans, the ones you think are invisible. I have the numbers. You have 30 seconds to tell me what you know about Ricardo's movements." The banker's face drained of color. I can't." 20 seconds. After that, every cent vanishes. Your choice." Information spilled out in a panicked stream. Properties, shell companies, recent transactions. Marco's team recorded everything, cross-referencing data points against their existing intelligence. Mireille arrived as the call ended, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "I can move the ledger now. My federal contact is waiting." "Do it," Valerio commanded. "Burn every connection behind you. If this goes wrong, I don't want anything leading back." She nodded, understanding the weight of the order. This wasn't just about Penny anymore. It was about dismantling an entire network. The hours crawled by like wounded animals. Teams reported back. Nothing at the warehouse, nothing at the factory, nothing at the abandoned church. Valerio's knuckles whitened around his phone. At 7:15 p.m., breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A night guard at one of Ricardo's legitimate businesses cracked under the pressure of having his gambling debts exposed. He stammered out details about a pool hall near the river, the kind of place that hadn't seen legitimate business in years. "Boarded windows," the guard said, voice shaking. "Side entrance with a chain lock from the inside. They took supplies there this morning, food, water, chairs." Valerio studied the building's blueprints, memorizing every exit and blind spot. The location made sense. Close to the water for quick disposal, far enough from residential areas to muffle sounds. He assembled 2 teams. The first would create a distraction 4 blocks away. Enough noise to draw attention, but not enough to trigger police response. The second team would secure the perimeter, ready to move on his signal, but the interior, that he would handle personally. His comms officer fitted him with an earpiece barely larger than a grain of rice. "Channel 3 is encrypted, boss. Voice activation only." Mireille's voice crackled through as he checked his weapons. "The ledger is with my contact. They're processing it now. It's bigger than we thought. Ricardo, the landlord, half the zoning board. When this breaks, it takes down the whole web." Valerio absorbed the implications. His organization had always operated in gray areas, but with clear lines, no civilians, no children, no unnecessary violence. Ricardo's network was different, corrupt to the core, feeding on the weak. Exposing them would change everything, forcing his own operations into newer, cleaner channels. "Understood," he replied. "Proceed with the file." He moved through the shadows like a ghost, years of training evident in every silent step. The night air carried the scent of the river, mud, decay, diesel fuel. His team maintained radio silence, communicating through hand signals as they took position. The diversion team struck at 9:15 p.m., the sound of breaking glass and car alarms echoing through empty streets. Valerio counted down, watching for movement at the pool hall's windows. Nothing. He approached the service entrance, noting fresh scratches around the lock where they'd modified it for the chain. The door's hinges had been recently oiled. No squeak would betray his entry. His gloved hand reached for the handle at exactly 9:28 p.m. The metal was cool against his palm as he eased it open, revealing a stairwell that smelled of mildew and stale beer. A single light spilled from under the office door above, casting weak shadows on the worn steps. Valerio breathed slowly, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. The building creaked, settling into itself like an old man sighing. Above him, voices murmured, too faint to make out, words but enough to confirm occupancy. His earpiece whispered with Mireille's final update, "File is being processed now, no turning back." He acknowledged with a subvocal click, then drew his weapon, a custom piece, selected for accuracy and minimal noise. Each step upward was carefully placed, his weight distributed, to avoid any telltale sounds from the aging wood. The light under the office door flickered, suggesting movement inside. Valerio pressed himself against the wall, counting heartbeats, measuring the rhythm of footsteps beyond the threshold. His training took over, mind clear, breathing steady, every sense attuned to the environment. This was the moment everything changed. When the ledger broke open, it would reshape the city's power structure. Old alliances would crumble, new ones would form, but none of that mattered now. In this moment, there was only the door, the light, and whatever waited on the other side. The office reeked of mildew and male sweat. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting sickly shadows across water-stained walls. Penny sat straight-backed in a metal folding chair, her wrists burning from the plastic zip ties. She refused to show fear even as Ricardo paced before her like a cut-rate villain from a B-movie. "Such spirit," he sneered, stopping to lean into her space. "Just like your mother, aren't you? So proud, so principled?" He spat the last word like poison. Penny met his gaze, channeling her mother's quiet strength. "My mother died because she wouldn't let men like you own her soul. You think you're the first bully to try?" The slap came fast, but she'd expected it. Her cheek stung, but she didn't flinch. "Bullies?" Ricardo's face twisted. "I create order. I make the city run. Your precious Valerio plays at being noble, but he's just as dirty." "The difference," Penny cut in, "is that he protects people. You feed on them." Something ugly flashed in Ricardo's eyes. He nodded to one of his men, a hulking figure by the door. "Show her what happens to mouthy bitches who don't know their place." The thug grinned, cracking his knuckles as he stepped forward. Penny's heart hammered, but she kept her spine straight. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Footsteps echoed from below, drawing everyone's attention. In that moment of distraction, someone knocked into a table. A pistol clattered across the cracked tile floor, spinning like a deadly top. The door exploded inward. Valerio moved like liquid shadow. His first shot took the knuckle-cracking thug in the shoulder, spinning him back. The second shot shattered the fluorescent light, plunging the room into chaos, split by muzzle flashes. Penny didn't hesitate. The awareness training kicked in. Identify resources, create advantages. She kicked the fallen pistol toward Valerio's position, the metal scraping across tile. He snatched it up in one fluid motion, now armed with both hands. A revolver lay near her. Feet, dropped by one of Ricardo's stunned men. Penny grabbed it, ignoring the bite of zip ties, and shifted to cover Valerio's blind spots. The weight felt strange but necessary in her hands. They moved like dancers who'd rehearsed for years, not strangers thrown together by fate. Valerio advanced with lethal grace, while Penny watched the angles, ready to call out threats. The office seemed to shrink, reality narrowing to the space between heartbeats. Gunsmoke filled her lungs. Plaster dust rained from bullet holes. Blood painted abstract patterns on the walls. Through it all, Penny kept her focus, remembering Valerio's lessons. Breathe steady, stay aware, trust your instincts. A hand seized her from behind. Ricardo's cologne, sharp and cloying, his arm locked around her throat as he dragged her backward. "Drop it!" he snarled at Valerio, "or I'll snap her pretty neck." Valerio went still, but his eyes never left Ricardo's face. Penny saw the minute adjustments in his stance, the way he shifted for a better angle. She knew what he needed, just a fraction of space. She let her body go slack, as if fainting, and Ricardo's grip loosened just enough. Valerio's shot cracked through the room like thunder. Ricardo's arm fell away. He stumbled back, touching the red bloom spreading across his chest with almost comical surprise. His mouth opened, but no words came. He folded to the floor, eyes still wide with disbelief that his carefully constructed world could end so suddenly. Silence descended like fresh snow, broken only by harsh breathing and the distant wail of sirens. Penny turned to find Valerio, his hands trembling as he lowered his weapon. She'd never seen him anything less than perfectly controlled. She crossed to him, stepping over debris and fallen bodies. His eyes were dark with something raw and desperate. Fear, she realized. Fear of losing her. Penny reached up to cup his face between her palms, feeling the slight tremor in his jaw. When she spoke, her voice was steady and clear, certain as sunrise. "I don't want one night," she said. "I want your whole life." The words hung in the dusty air between them, weighted with truth and promise. His hands came up to cover hers, the trembling slowly stilling at her touch. Around them, the room bore witness to violence and survival, but in this moment there was only the space they shared, the breath they drew together. Outside, car doors slammed, boots thundered up metal stairs, radio static crackled with coded messages, but Penny kept her hands on Valerio's face, anchoring him as his team secured the scene. The night wasn't over. There would be statements and evidence collection, medical checks, and debriefings. The ledger would start its cascade through official channels, bringing down Ricardo's entire network. Yet here, in this broken room that smelled of cordite and courage, Penny held the most dangerous man she'd ever known, and felt utterly, completely safe. His pulse beat, strong against her palms, his breath warm on her wrists where the zip ties had left angry marks. They stood together in the aftermath, neither moving to break contact. The city churned on beyond the walls, sirens and secrets tangling in the night air, but they remained still, a point of quiet in the storm, two hearts finding their rhythm in the dark. Headlines screamed across every screen in the city. Massive corruption ring exposed. Dozens arrested in pre-dawn raids. High-profile developer among those indicted. The breaking news alerts flashed relentlessly, each notification more explosive than the last. Reporters stood breathless outside police stations, their microphones thrust toward stone-faced officers who offered only terse, no comments. Penny watched the news unfold from the safety of the penthouse, her fingers laced with Valerio's as Mireille's carefully orchestrated plan bore fruit. The ledger, her mother's final gift, had torn through the city's criminal hierarchy like lightning through dry timber. Each page had become a weapon, each column of neat figures, now ammunition in the hands of prosecutors who moved with shocking speed. "They got Hernandez," she whispered, recognizing the developer being led away in handcuffs, his expensive suit rumpled, his face ashen with shock. The same man who'd ordered evictions across 3 neighborhoods last winter, leaving families to shiver in the cold. Valerio's empire didn't crumble. It transformed. With surgical precision, he cut away compromised operations, redirecting resources into legitimate channels. Lines that once preyed on civilians were shuttered, replaced by strictly controlled operations that avoided civilian harm. His power didn't diminish. It evolved, becoming something cleaner, more focused. Meetings stretched late into the night, his voice low and commanding as he issued new directives, rewrote rules, established boundaries that hadn't existed before. The changes rippled through the city, day by day. On day 3, thick stacks of paperwork passed through lawyers' offices, reorganizing businesses and establishing new protocols. Signatures dried on deeds and contracts, while Penny brewed pot after pot of coffee for the exhausted attorneys who came and went. By the end of the first week, Valerio's remaining operations ran with ruthless efficiency, but now there were lines that wouldn't be crossed, rules that couldn't be broken. Enforcers who'd once terrorized neighborhoods found themselves reassigned or dismissed, their territories redrawn with careful attention to community impact. Week 2 saw the tenants return to Penny's old building, now managed by a legal trust with ironclad protections. Families carried boxes up freshly painted stairs, children racing through halls that no longer reeked of mildew. Mrs. Gonzalez wept openly when she unlocked her door to find new appliances waiting, the leaky ceiling finally fixed after years of complaints. The predatory landlord who'd tried to squeeze them out sat in a holding cell, his indictment coming down in week 3. The charges against him filled 3 pages, each count representing a family whose suffering he'd dismissed. Bianca, ever practical, seized the moment of change. With Mireille's quiet backing, she opened a neighborhood legal clinic by the end of the first month. The storefront sparkled with new paint, its windows promising community defense and know your rights in multiple languages. She worked with the same fierce loyalty she'd always shown Penny, but now her protection extended to the whole block. Her phone rang constantly, her desk piled high with cases that needed someone scrappy enough to fight the system from within. "You should see their faces," she told Penny over late-night takeout in the new office. "When somebody finally listens instead of brushing them off. It's like watching people stand up straight for the first time in years." Through it all, Penny and Valerio circled each other with growing certainty, the tension between them built like bread rising, slow, inevitable, perfect. They shared meals, strategy sessions, quiet moments in the security of their home. His touch grew more lingering, her smiles more intimate. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her across a room, his dark eyes following her movements with an intensity that made her skin warm. Other times, she'd wake to find him beside her bed, keeping silent vigil against nightmares that came less frequently now. Dawn broke soft and golden on a peaceful Sunday, the kitchen filled with familiar scents: yeast, flour, the particular warmth of ovens working. Penny moved through her baking routine, finding comfort in the rhythm of kneading, shaping, waiting. Her hands worked the dough with practiced ease, thumbs pressing into the elastic mass, palms stretching and folding until it felt just right. Valerio watched from the counter, his crisp shirt sleeves rolled up, a dusting of flour on his cuffs. He'd begun to join her for these early mornings, his presence a steady counterpoint to her movements. The morning light painted everything in honey tones, the marble counters, the steel appliances, the curve of Valerio's jaw as he studied her work. A single beam caught the subtle silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, evidence of the stress he carried even now. Penny felt the rightness of the moment settle in her bones. She turned to him, her hands still warm from the dough, a small smudge of flour on her cheek. "Please," she whispered, echoing that first desperate night, but with such different meaning now. "Just one night." Her lips curved in a smile, eyes steady on his. "Every night." He crossed to her in 2 steps, gathering her close. Their first kiss tasted of flour and promise, his hands cradling her face with a reverence that made her heart ache. They made love in the growing light, unhurried at last, taking time to learn each other's bodies without fear or urgency. His fingers traced the soft curve of her hip with wonder. Her hands mapped the scars that told stories he'd never shared. The memory would always belong to this moment, the scent of rising bread, sunlight streaming through windows, the feel of him moving against her with exquisite care. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. His body against hers felt like coming home. A year passed like water flowing downstream, each day building on the last. Seasons turned, bringing summer heat that baked the sidewalks, then autumn winds that swept leaves into colorful drifts against storefronts. Winter's brief grip gave way to spring again, and with it, renewal. The old buildings reopening drew the whole neighborhood for a block party. Penny, now the outright owner of her bakery, distributed plates of her mother's milk bread recipe, the same one that had hidden the ledger and changed everything. The soft, pillowy loaves disappeared as quickly as she could bring them out, children's sticky fingers reaching eagerly for seconds. "Just like your mama's," Mrs. Rodriguez told her, eyes bright with unshed tears. "She'd be so proud of what you've done, Nina." Children darted between adults' legs, chalk hearts blooming on the clean pavement in their wake. Music drifted from open windows, a mix of styles and languages that reflected the neighborhood's diversity. Fairy lights strung between buildings twinkled even in the daylight, promises of the celebration that would continue into evening. Bianca held court near the legal clinic's door, laughing as she checked items off a clipboard, her casual confidence a testament to how much had changed. Her new assistant, a local college student with sharp eyes and sharper wit, kept pace beside her. "Never thought I'd see this place looking so good," Bianca called as Penny passed with another tray of bread. "Remember when we used to pray the elevator wouldn't break down with us inside?" Valerio stood at the edges of the celebration, still deadly to those who crossed him, but softened here among Penny's people. His men maintained a discreet presence, less obvious than before but no less vigilant. When she approached, he pulled her into his arms with possessive tenderness, one hand resting at the small of her back, anchoring her to him. "You were never leverage," he murmured against her hair, his voice for her ears alone. "You were the point, the reason to make everything better." Later that night, in their shared kitchen high above the city, Penny hung a simple brass key on its hook by the door. The metal gleamed in the low light, ordinary, domestic, permanent. Not a key to a fortress or a prison, but to a home freely chosen. She felt Valerio's presence behind her, solid and sure as gravity. His footsteps were silent, but she'd learned to sense his approach, her body attuned to his proximity like a compass finding north. She turned off the lights, leaving the kitchen in darkness, broken only by the city's glow through the windows. The space held a year's worth of memories now. Shared meals, quiet conversations, the first time she'd seen him truly smile. When she turned to him, his outline was familiar as her own heartbeat. She reached for his hand in the darkness, finding it waiting for hers. Together they stepped into the soft night, the city spread below them like a map of possibilities. Buildings glittered against the velvet sky. Streets wound between them like rivers of light. The streets that had once held only threat and struggle now felt different.